So I've been here 44 years, and that means I've seen massive growth in this county, in this state, in sport, in all areas, but massive growth in industry at all levels. And few changes have been as controversial and polarizing and impactful in sports as name, image, and likeness. When the NCAA passed NIL legislation 4 summers ago, it changed the landscape forever. And while many believe athletes benefiting financially for bringing millions, and in some cases hundreds of millions, into universities and colleges' athletic department budgets, long overdue, and while the intent of NIL was noble, NIL legislation was adopted with no rules and regulations, and something that started as athletes seeking endorsements, attending openings, promoting businesses on social media has kind of gone off the rails. And for many, especially in football and basketball, college sports have become pay for play. So now it's become so out of control recently that we've had the House get involved, and we have all kinds of rules and regulations where they're trying to rein it in, and it's probably never going to get reined in. So gentlemen like we have here to my left are dealing with this in their jobs at all different levels. So NIL combined with the NCAA consequently changing their transfer rules and has resulted in free agency with the transfer portal was a whole other unintended consequence of this. When you had now NIL and the transfer portal without any guidelines, it's become the wild, wild west. So today we have a panel of gentlemen here from all different angles that can talk about NIL from all different angles. To my immediate left, Brian White, the Vice President and Director of Athletics at Florida Atlantic University since 2018. Next to Brian, Eric Kresser is the former Palm Beach Gardens, University of Florida, and Cincinnati Bengals quarterback, coached at Benjamin for 10 years, I believe 7 as a head coach, and now works as a private quarterback coach. Next to Eric, Kevin Anderson is a West Palm Beach-based sports agent who deals directly with NIL. And at the end, we have Jon Santucci, who is Gannett, Florida's recruiting writer and has covered NIL and its variations from the start. So we'll have a discussion here, question and answer. And after hearing from our guests, this is going to be very interactive. We invite you to any kind of questions, any opinions you have on it. We will open it up. And if you think of any questions now, hold on to them. We'll have plenty of time to answer them. So first of all, there's one question that I can ask for each of them, and we'll go down the line, is how NIL has impacted each of their jobs. And we'll start with Brian.
Thank you. First of all, great intro, and you couldn't have said it better. I agree with almost everything you said there across the board. NIL has made our jobs infinitely more complex and more. It's always been a 24/7 job, and now somehow it's become even more so. But I also think it is long overdue, and I think it is something that I'm an optimist, so I believe we get to be on the cutting edge of figuring this out and finding a legally defendable model in college sports. I think that there's, as we all know, there's issues with our model and the collegiate model, which I believe is a great thing, and I think has tremendous value for not only universities around the country as marketing arms for great universities, but also for student athletes, and provides great opportunities, and also for our United States Olympics. So it's a tremendous value. The things that we focus on in my role, all of us obviously are coming at this from very different angles. In my role as an athletic director, the biggest focus since I started my career has been on revenue generation, and I think that's where we have college sports, we have competition, and we have rabid fan bases and alumni bases that want us to win and excel and compete at the highest level. That's always been about revenue generation for athletic directors, those that lead successful programs and figure out how to generate revenue at a high level. And I think it used to be that money went to facilities and coaching salaries and different things. Now, obviously, we need revenue for player acquisition and player retention. So that focus hasn't changed. If anything, it's become just more highly pressurized. But I think I look at it as, like I think we all have to, as an opportunity. And I do think we'll get to a time where we're all better for this rapid period of change.
Eric, you were coaching high school athletes when this whole landscape changed. How did it change your job as a high school coach?
Yeah, it definitely threw a monkey wrench into my everyday coaching job. I didn't deal with NIL directly like Kevin or Brian does on a daily basis, but definitely being a coach and supporting families on an everyday basis, they had a lot of questions. And being the head coach, I was always the one they came to ask. So I think my job as a coach, and I think what most coaches need to kind of take on as their job is to get the kids and the families on the right path, to get them to speak with the right people, not necessarily take control of the situation, but just advise them in the right manner, so they're with good people and can get good advice. Because a lot of the families that I dealt with, they were elite athletes. Some 5-star guys, and a lot of guys are playing at SEC schools, ACC schools, stuff like that. So there was a lot of money on the line for these kids, and a lot of these families, this was the first time in their family's history that they've had these opportunities. So a lot of them don't know how to deal with it, so that they have to find professional advice. And I think as a high school coach, I don't think we're qualified to be that representative, and I don't think that's our job. But I do think, because we care about the family so much and the kids, that we do have a responsibility to try to get them with the right people.
And Kevin's sports agents in the past were, I mean, you couldn't speak to high school players, right? You couldn't speak to college players. It would jeopardize a whole lot for them. Now, you're a necessary part of this. What did this do for you and impact your job?
Well, it really blossomed the whole industry. So before, like when you really look at how many people you say, oh, 1% rule, 1% make it to college, 1% make it to pros. Like still to this day, they say you can fit every NFL player that ever played in Soldier Field where the Bears play, right? So it's kind of overwhelming to see how hard it is to get there. And then now, ultimately, so many more people need the help and guidance. So obviously, agents weren't representing college players until like the tail end of their senior season, when draft prep was coming on and all-star games and advice like that. So now you have kids who may be 15, 16 years old who need to understand, hey, how do I make the most of this opportunity? Like Coach Kresser said, is really such a pivotal time for their family and their opportunity. And some of the sports are so high impact that one injury can totally derail that for you. So I think being able to now help more kids is very important, and definitely made more of an industry for NIL agents that didn't exist.
And John, we'll talk about some of the stories you've heard later on in this of the NIL, the offers and stories. But you would talk about recruiting in the past. You would talking about kids taking a trip, making a decision based on the school, based on the coach. Now it's based on a lot of other things. How has it changed what you do?
It's completely changed the conversation, right? So, like you said, the conversation used to be, how do you fit at this school? How do you like the coaching staff? Can you see yourself living there if, God forbid, you got hurt or whatever? Is that really where you want to be? Now the conversation is, what's the offer? What schools are you considering flipping to? And then you talk to people who know those schools and you find out what the offer is there. And literally when you hear about a kid flipping from one school to another in November, that's because somebody put up a bigger stack of money 9 times out of 10 over the last 2 years. Or that stack of money has gotten smaller from school A. So that's, we never dealt with agents 3 years ago. You would never do that. You would talk directly to a player or a coach, and that was the end of the conversation. Now it's, oh, well, have you talked to my agent? And the schools are dealing with the agent, and I have no problem with that, but it's a completely different dynamic on the job now.
Brian, early in NIL, and I know you remember this, I wrote a story about a women's basketball player at FAU, Alexa Zaff, and she told me she had partnered with a food delivery service that was paying her $30 to promote their business. And she said, and she was so excited, talking to me, she said, this is so cool, I can make $30 a week. I mean, and that, when I wrote that story, it was kind of like, this is what the intention was. And of course, it was going to be bigger, more money at different levels of different sports, but that kind of was the original intention. So when this started, what did FAU do to kind of guide their their athletes through NIL, the advice they gave them, and what do you continue to do in that area?
You know, I'd say encouragement, and that is some of the more fun stories. Continued education. We partner with a company called Open Doors, and we have Open Doors Marketplace where you can literally go online, see any of our athletes, what sort of things they'd be interested in promoting, what sort of things they'd be interested in doing work-wise, appearances, and what they would charge for each one. So they all are on there, and Open Doors will actually put different opportunities on every single day that our athletes can go look at. Many people don't realize the athlete is actually a track athlete that had the most NIL deals of any athlete we had in year one. She had 30 plus NIL deals on her own, hustled, and made some good money. And so I think that's a really cool opportunity. Yes, we've all had collectives and different NIL initiatives go on that are university-wide and help support a lot of different athletes at once. And you hear about the big deals, but you don't hear a lot about the deals. We had some of our basketball players did a deal with Celsius and did some appearances. Mattress Mac did a deal with our basketball team as well. Football guys did a deal with Hooters, and we had deals across the board in all of our different sports, hundreds of deals that most people don't track. But I do think the value of that is learning how to make money on your own, learning how to be a representative of your own brand. So one thing that Open Doors would do that they would come in and do brand training with our athletes. They could tell you your social media, when's the best time to post if you want to increase your following, what should you have on there and what should you not have on there. Again, it's your choice, but these are the things that increase your value and these are the things that decrease your value. So I think that education was key for us in helping our athletes have success on their own and helping encourage that is, to me, the beautiful part about it.
And that's a great point, because right now what we see mostly is Carson Beck getting $4.1 million, which is to do nothing but play football at the University of Miami. It's pay for play, where these are the stories where they're actually doing something for that money, which you don't hear a lot of those. I've tried to write a lot about them, and I've talked to many of your athletes on this, but you don't hear a lot about those stories.
No, it's fascinating. We had Elijah Martin, for example, our neighbor. He would go and play basketball with our neighbor and train him, an 8-year-old kid at the time. And this was before Elijah Martin was Elijah Martin. And I think the lessons were like $50. And it was Elijah put the number on it. He'd come over for $50. I'd see him on the street, right across the street from us, and he'd be giving our neighbor a basketball lesson.
Oh, that's cool.
When I come home from work. It was pretty incredible. My 3-year-old now, who was 1 year at the time, used to love watching it. So it's fascinating, the stories of how this came about. Yeah. But it was a great, authentic, it was something that he enjoyed doing. It was valuable money at the time, and I think that's continued to evolve to where I think our athletes really enjoy when they go to a Boys and Girls Club or a YMCA, and even if it's an initiative that's driven as part of a bigger NIL event, if there's real work behind it and real community engagement, I think that there's professional development value in them as they're heading into the job market later in their career.
And Eric, you coached Chauncey Bowens, who Kirby Smart took a helicopter and landed on your football field, I believe, to recruit him. So you're dealing with them now before they get to the college.
Correct.
So how is the high school coach? What advice? What role are you playing at that stage before when they're making the decision on where they should go and before they've even signed an NIL deal?
Well, I think a high school coach is just a liaison. I think, when a college coach comes in, obviously you want to meet them and greet them and take care of them while they're there. They probably haven't been there that much, so you want to get them in and out. They probably have a lot of places to be, especially if they're flying helicopters, and so you want to make that a good visit for them, and you want to get them with the right kids and sit down and have the real conversation, which at that point is really just getting to know each other. Those meetings, there's nothing being talked about with the NIL or anything like that. It's really just the coach getting to know the high school coach and the kid, and that's what that's for. It's for the coaches to come in and say, hey, we like you, we're going to recruit you, we want to get to know you, we want you to get to know us. And I always took that as part of my job, even though it wasn't in my contract as a high school coach. I thought it was very important to make that a high priority as far as helping in any way I could with recruiting, because let's face it, these kids, when they're coming up, they have dreams of playing major college football and NFL football. And you know, that's, for a lot of these kids, that's their one shot to make it. And I think they work extremely hard for it. I think they prepare their whole lives for it. You brought up Carson Beck at Miami. I think he's doing a lot to earn that money. I think he probably works as hard as anybody on that campus, physically and mentally. And they're generating a lot of revenue because of what he's going to produce. So I don't think it's unfair for him to make that money. I think he's earning it. I think he's worked his whole life to get that opportunity. And, you know, we'll see how it pans out. There's no guarantees that he has a great season, but I think he's earned the right to be in that position. And I think he's doing a lot for that money. Yeah. I really do.
So, Kevin, I want to ask you about how you make contact our agents pursuing these kids, and like you mentioned, at 15 years old, at times you have to do that. If you go to a football game on a Friday night, a high school football game, are there agents on the sidelines in the stands scouting kids? But also talking about what Eric just said, when something like that happens, are the kids contacting you and saying, Kirby Smart wants me, what's the best, what kind of deal can I get from Georgia if I go there?
Yeah, so from a scouting standpoint, it's pretty typical. So I watch a lot of film. You know, I'll look at their huddle tapes. Twitter, or X, formerly Twitter, is a great place because that's where a lot of athletes post their highlights and, you know, post, I got offered from so-and-so. So that's a good way to chart it. But honestly, scouting at the high school is almost easier than college, in my opinion, because really they're looking for measurables more than anything. If you see a 16-year-old kid who's 6'6", long arms, and has light feet, he's probably going to be a pretty good tackle, right? And that's what the colleges are scouting. So there's not much difference there. You know, high school games are great. I typically, like last weekend, we had a good showdown at St. Thomas Aquinas. It was St. Francis for Chaminade and St. Thomas versus Mater Dei. So there was like, I mean, in NIL dollars on that field, I mean, could be approaching close to $10 million. You know, there's perennial 5 stars there. So, you know, sit there with your roster, both teams' names, and typically at this point, and I think it's important to look at the timelines, and like Coach said, when they come to your school, that's the time when they're trying to get to just grab your arm, see how big you look in person, are you full, maybe offer you a scholarship. There's a timeline to the process of the recruitment and the NIL. And really, more times than not, they wait for the official visit time. So typically, and it works both ways. So it's in the benefit of the university to wait until official visits to start to talk about that. Because typically by then they've narrowed down their list of a top 5. Or, in football, I can't say for basketball, but June official visits are very important. So 5 weekends in June, and if you don't typically lock up those weekends, another school is going to go further down their list and say, oh, well, we can't get this kid. Let's pour more of our resources and time into the next kid. So the timeline is very important. And from a scouting standpoint, it's very traditional. And I typically would reach out to the player directly and always, you know, hey, if you want to set up a phone call with your parents, you know, a lot of times there's like, you know, walk a fine line with, you know, talking to people under the age of 18, or their high school head coach. So I think those are the 2 most appropriate ways, but very much social media, watching film, and going to their games.
And John, we've seen on the college level, some of the coaches who just, the older coaches who they're out. They just, this whole thing has been, this is a lot more work, there's a lot more to deal with. Nick Saban famously said that after a bowl game, that he had like 8 kids come in his office say, I want more money. And that's when he said, I'm done with this. How did high school coaches react when this first started? And do you think, has NIL, and I know it's a different level, but has it kind of pushed any high school coaches out of the business, or is it not to that level yet? And how are they reacting to this whole thing?
Yeah, that's a good. By the way, can I just go back to one thing? I completely agree with you about Carson Beck. The question is, should we call it NIL? Right? Is he getting paid because of it? Is he profiting off of name, image, and likeness, or is he making $4 million to play quarterback at the University of Miami? Is there value there? 100%. Is it an NIL deal? Not really. That's my
and that's what I said. He's not for that money. He's not he's not promoting anything. He's not doing like what kids are doing. But right, it's more pay for play. Is it not?
The umbrella though that we put the deals under, right? Is
More
Yes.
the brand value of Miami football. Right?
Yeah, and it's perfectly legal and it's fine, but it's just not. It's not NIL. Is that right? Is it?
You open up a can of worms. Because
Leave it to the reporter.
I'm staying out of this conversation.
He might not want to hear what I'm about to say, but money's been given out to these players for a long time.
Right.
So NIL is not a new thing, and I think NIL is a disguise to pay players.
Okay.
For
Yep.
the most part.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
you said it. You brought it
No,
up.
I completely agree. No, I completely agree.
Since I've been in
All right. So to answer your actual question, it's like a bad debate now. So we had a lot of high school coaches that were very unsure of what the landscape would be because you kind of said it, right? There's no rules. So those first couple of years were very interesting of like, how much money should we expect and what are we hearing and is this number accurate? And I don't know how to best influence my players because this is all brand new and this school's saying this and this school's saying that. So that was very interesting. Where some coaches wanted to get out was when the FHSAA, which is the governing body of high schools in Florida, passed the rule last summer that you could now get NIL money in high school. And we had a bunch of coaches saying to me, both on and off the record, like, if this goes where we think it could go, then it might be time to look for another job because I don't want to walk in the locker room and the kid's making more money than me.
Yeah.
Which in Florida is not hard, but that's another story.
So, and I mentioned this before, one of the biggest unintended consequences with NIL became the transfer portal, and that was because the NCAA, again, it just opened it up the can of worms by not forcing the athletes to sit out a year when they transfer. So it became open free agency. It's just totally open free agency. So, Brian, we've seen a lot of talented players because of that from FAU teams just transfer to more prominent schools. They know they have a great year. They go, now I can make money and go to a power school, a Power 5 school, a Power 4 school, and don't have to sit out a year. Is that the new reality, and how do you combat that?
You know what? I don't think it's a new reality. I actually think we've done really well on the counter to that. You know, we went to the Final Four and we turned our entire team. We had some really generous donors that stepped up and provided some funds that helped us provide some name, image, and likeness opportunities that allowed us to continue that success. So I think that we can be really, really competitive given where we are at FAU. I think we have some unique opportunities. I do think that, you know, in the new world, if you look at Group of 5 versus or Group of 6 versus Power 4, et cetera, that is going to be a constant conversation. But I think it's the way you combat that is create a great culture, and I know that's not all that matters, but I think that's really important. We've had a lot of guys that turned down a lot of great opportunities to stay at FAU, and I think that there's some good things behind that. But we have to be competitive in our revenue share as it is today, and we are. We've been really competitive within our league, and so we've had more success than most in the NIL and in the revenue share, and that's all we can do is continue fighting. And you know, I think what you mentioned about it being it's almost the perfect time of we've had a model for many years that frankly just isn't legally defendable, and with that, when you have, do you think students should be able to transfer? I think, of course, students should be able to transfer if coaches can leave. You know, do you think student athletes should be able to make money off name, image, likeness? Of course, those are no-brainers. But that happening at the same time, I think, with not much of a strategic plan, has been difficult for a lot of people. But I do believe this is a rapid period of change, and we'll end up better for it. And I think this ends in collective bargaining. Maybe the House settlement will be codified with the Scores Act, and then maybe that includes collective bargaining as well. But whatever our future looks like, I think that I think we'll be better for the period of change we're going through.
So, Eric, how much money did you make when you were at Florida? No.
So when my parents came up to our games on the weekends, I had to borrow $20
Well,
from my dad. because I didn't have any money.
Yes, so that's my question. Before this all, people don't realize that you weren't allowed to hold a job. You weren't allowed to work.
Right.
You couldn't. So what would NIL have meant if you could have just made, I don't know, $1,000 a month, or a couple
Not only
$1,000
were you
bucks,
not
what would it have meant?
allowed to work, you didn't have time. Football was your work.
Right,
That
right.
was your job. You're doing that all day long when you're not in school. I mean, a Division I football player can't hold a job
Yes.
outside of football and school.
Yes.
So, if I was lucky that my parents would be able to give me $20, $40 on the weekends, but a lot of kids don't have that. And so, I think when you look at, I think it's hard for a player that maybe doesn't have those resources to go in on a Saturday afternoon and look around the stadium and see everybody wearing his jersey. And they all paid $100 for that jersey, and they're all coming to see him, and he's going to ask his buddy to borrow $20. That's kind of hard to take.
Yeah,
so, I think it is going in the right direction. I'm glad it happened. I wish it would have happened, when I was in school. But I think there's a time and place for everything. I think everything that did happen over the years, that's why we're at where we're at, and I think everybody's trying. I think there's a lot, like he said, there's a lot of issues, and I don't think there was a plan going into it. I think it all just kind of happened really fast, and I hope it gets figured out in the next few years. I hope it gets figured out for everybody, especially for the players and their folks, because they're not in the know. They're not like these guys dealing with this every day. So it's really it's frustrating, and it's stressful at the same time for these families. So I think it will come to a head here, but I'm all for it. I'm all for being fair, and the TV contracts are very lucrative, and I think everybody involved should get a fair shake.
And Kevin, you may have touched on this earlier, but with that being said, you said you talk to parents, you talk to the athletes before, when they're in high school, so they haven't signed any of these deals. So what advice are you giving them? Because it's just human nature to jump to the best. They give me $1,000 more, I'm going there.
Yeah.
What kind of advice do you to make sure that doesn't happen?
It's a great question. I'm actually proud of a lot of our guys who have not taken their highest paid offer, right? And a lot of that goes into how we approach the process. So one of the biggest risks that Coach talked about is, hey, your coach leaves. I thought you brought a great point. It's kind of the both sides of it, right? Player benefits, coach benefits. And how do those offset? If my coach leaves, whether it's my position coach, which moves way more than a head coach, or my team does bad and my coach gets fired, my situation at that university vastly changes. Mm-hmm. And then most importantly, the end goal, like we talked about, is some kids want to go to the NFL or their professional sport. Their fit by position matches a scheme. So a lot of times the coaches, they're recruiting based on scheme. So the number one thing we look at is, what's your fit? So we do a whole competitive breakdown, kind of, the number one thing is head coach stability. It's the first thing we look at. Number 8 is the actual NIL value, right? So there's a whole slew of position coach, right? The guy who's gonna watch your film every day, who's gonna mark up your practice sheet, the person who's directly involved in your personal growth. So there's often times where we're like, hey, this is a great program, great head coach, but your position coach is the special teams coordinator who never played that position. And then now you've got this other school who's got a Hall of Fame linebacker, and he's your linebacker coach, played 10 years in the NFL. That's going to very much change that player's experience. So it's all of those things into one, and we really look at it top to bottom and then help. At the end of the day, the player and the family have to make their decision, but the money factor, we, as much as we can, try to tell them that should not be your number one thing, especially your first year out of high school. Because as we all know, like, those freshman contracts are insignificant compared to a junior or a senior. So it's mostly about fit, and then you have to say, hey, there's a word that's thrown around a lot, fair market value, right? And I think we touched on it a little bit of, like, there's all these different factors of when we were saying how it came to be. What should we pay them? What should we not pay them? And then that is fair market. It's let the market kind of dictate, right? It's based on a need, right? A need base. If you really need this player because he fits your scheme more, you might write an extra $50,000, right? So we would then look at the position room and say, okay, well, how do you fit in this scheme? who's there ahead of you, how long till you get on the field. Because once you're in college, you see 20,000 people go to the transfer portal every year, and only about 4,000 stick. So there's this big risk of now you're giving up a college education for free to try to go find the right fit for you, and you may have just gotten put into a program because you like the colors and the shiny objects and the trophy case, and they, instead of develop you in year 2 or year 3, are going to go tap the portal to go get a veteran player ahead of you. So we definitely look at the depth chart at your position group and see, how do you fit and how soon can you play. If you play as a freshman, your fair market value goes up dramatically. Right?
Yeah.
So those would be all the factors that we talk about. How do we look at it from really a fit and a need-based, not as much a dollar value. So
Jon was involved in the coverage of a quarterback named Jaden Rashada, who went to 2 high schools. Was at IMG here in Florida for 1 year, went back to his high school in California for the last 2. He was linked, and did he sign with Miami, Florida, and Georgia without ever playing for any one of those 3 schools. And then he had a lawsuit against Florida without ever playing at Florida. Then he transferred to Arizona State, played 1 year at Arizona State, and this year he's playing at Sacramento State. Is this a poster child for the NIL era?
No, I think he's the poster child for the revenue sharing era of let's make it so that you can't sue us. That was a very interesting recruitment because it was one of the first ones where the agent put himself in the spotlight. And you had not really seen that before at a high school at the time, going into his senior year, so just finished his junior year of high school, and you've got an agent talking a lot to the media and very much putting himself in the spotlight and saying, oh, we have a really big offer, and I don't remember the exact words, so this isn't a direct quote, but he put himself very much in the spotlight and shone a spotlight by extension onto Jaden getting a big offer from these schools. He committed to Miami, which we had been told off the record was a very big number. And then Florida gave him a bigger number, and he committed and ended up signing with Florida. And then we started hearing things even before he signed about Napier not knowing the full extent of the offer, and Napier not wanting a quarterback making more money than any of the coaches were, and all these are, and again, these are not direct quotes, but these were things we were hearing, and I'm sure they've all come out by now in that lawsuit. And so, and then he signs with a school believing that he was going to get amount X, and he, finds out that that's not the amount, and then decides he wants to leave the school and sue the school, I think a year later. And I think if you talk to a lot of agents, I don't know if you'd agree with this, it wasn't really a question of if, it was a question of when. When is this going to happen? Because there's too many guys that were hitting the portal so quickly after getting a big check that it was like, somebody's going to sue somebody. It's just a matter of time. We just saw Wisconsin is now suing Miami over a safety that, never even went into the portal, but ends up, enrolling at UM. So it was a matter of when at some point with the amount of money that was getting thrown out. But I think honestly, when you get into what the revenue sharing model looks like, and specifically what the contract, and we were talking about it before, the contract's completely different than it was.
Collective era.
Yeah. So, and now it's much more, let's protect ourselves.
Yeah.
And so I think honestly, in a roundabout way, he kind of helped usher some of that language in, I think.
Yeah, and if I may, I think it's really interesting from a player dynamic. December 8th is the early signing period for football, and December 9th is the transfer portal.
Yes.
So it's very easy to tell a family, to tell a player, hey, you're going to come here, you're going to be our guy, and then the very next day they go sign a kid at your position who's older than you, who's played college games. So it's just, that to me always rubs me the wrong way because it seems very misleading.
Yeah.
It's just interesting timeline. Yeah.
Well, I don't know what happened with Jaden Rashada, but I talked to a lot of people that know a lot of people in recruiting in high school football, and I just wonder if there were a lot of promises made, but there was no contract. And I just wonder if, he was going in thinking it was one thing, told it was one thing, and then all of a sudden it's not there. Now what do I do? Now am I stuck? Did all the other schools that were recruiting me sign other guys?
Mm-hmm.
Now I get to the very end and it's a different deal. I mean, that's why I hope this all gets fixed, because I think I've had my own players at Benjamin who had numbers thrown out there, and at the last hour before signing day, all of a sudden coaches wouldn't answer the phone, or the numbers went away, or the deals changed, and that's not fair.
Yeah.
That's not fair. That shouldn't happen. And that's not every college. That was a handful of guys.
Right.
But it's out there, and it happens. I don't know what happened with Rashada, but I've dealt with that personally.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's a very small percentage of coaches that do that, but it happens quite a bit.
And I think it's set up like that because you can't sign your contract until you execute student status. So like really you can't finalize a lot of the agreements, and it's starting to change and be a little easier now, but so you already commit or you sign, and you're at that point dictating where you're going. All these other schools have to kind of fall off at that point, and you can't actively sign that agreement until you're at school taking classes.
Okay.
So as a player, I mean, there's no business model in America that you operate like that. So.
John?
And correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the issue, Brian, please correct me if I'm saying this wrong, but when NIL first started, there was almost a separation of like church and state with the collective and the coaching staff.
Absolutely.
And so with the Rashada situation specifically, that was a situation where the collective was doing one thing and the coaching staff
really
was
believe
not,
that?
I'm going to say fully aware.
I do in many
I'm going to
instances.
say
I think
fully
that,
aware.
I don't know that
The
one.
head coach is going to get who he wants.
I call,
There is no way that he doesn't know what's going on with the quarterback.
I'm
There's
just
no way
saying.
that's happening.
when I've been told several times that in that situation the coach was not fully aware of the number that was,
That's a flat out lie.
I'm okay with that. I'm just saying what I was told.
I think at the time of that case, that was University of Florida had multiple collectives, which is also very dangerous.
Yes.
There was a world where
Yes.
certain schools would have multiple collectives, and it may be one big donor at a school. And you would tell me if I'm wrong, but I thought it was something where one of the parents may have agreed to something from a collective with Rashada.
I think the dad was
So the
very
dad
involved.
had been talking to one collective, and then they're talking to the school. So that was the wild, wild, wild west. We've come a long way.
I think that, and I think that's the situation that forced Florida to consolidate to one collective. If I'm wrong, I
sure.
believe that was the.
But
that was
typically, the head
impetus to
coach
that.
does
Yeah.
have a lot of say
so.
in player acquisition.
I wouldn't want my own son or daughter, I don't know who would want to go to 4 different colleges. You know, that doesn't help you academically. You lose 20% of your, I know that's not what we're talking about today, but at the end of the day, if you lose 20% of your credits every time you transfer academically, that's hard. You know, and then and graduation timeline, a lot of things, that just makes things a lot more difficult. Socially, I think that's difficult. But also athletically, there's data to show that all league players at group of 6 conferences or mid-majors in basketball have a better chance if they're all league where they are and having success where they are at the NBA or the NFL by staying exactly where they are. So again, I go back to, I absolutely believe if a coach leaves, a student athlete should be able to transfer. I absolutely believe that student athletes should be able to generate revenue based on not just their, what we call image and likeness or whatever we're going to call it in this new CBA. But I just think it has to make sense. I think that, and the only way it makes sense is if it has been collectively bargained. I don't think you can put rules on a group of people that haven't agreed to those rules. But I think there's rules that can come into play with a 2 or 4 year contract. Maybe that contract has a buyout. But I would be shocked if we don't end up in collective bargaining, whether that's employment status, non-employment status, whether that's through codifying the Scores Act and congressional. It can't be state by state. We've proven we're all going to do whatever we can to get a competitive edge over each other. Yeah. There's one thing that's consistent in the history of college athletics: the rabid competitiveness of our schools, our fan base, our alums, our students has proven to be unmatched. And that's the beauty of college sports, the passion behind it. So I think you're right on it, and I could not agree more.
The problem the other side that I think everybody should try to think about is why is the sport that an athlete plays, why is that not a track? I made football a living after I played professionally. I'm still coaching football for a living. That's my profession. So I'm just being honest, but the football culture you're not going to get a lot of engineers and guys working at Google. I mean, these guys want to do football for their life. That's why they're. I'm not saying that they're all going to do that.
No, can I ask you something? Okay.
But why can't, let me just finish. Let me say something about when I taught high school, okay, at Palm Beach Gardens High School.
Right.
They paid me a full salary
Okay.
and benefits to teach art. I had 40 kids in 6 classes. Not one of them wanted to be there.
Okay.
Okay? I went out after school for 2 hours to practice. That's all the time that I got with 70 kids.
Right.
They all wanted to be there. That's what they wanted to do with their life.
Okay.
But I didn't make a dime doing that. Why can't football be a track where I start as a player, but I can be an AD, I can be a coach, I can be an agent. Why does it have to be, why do you have to turn them into something else? Why can't it be football?
No, I didn't say tournament in.
Well, I'm just saying, like, most of the football players that we're talking about go to college to play football. That's why they go to college. And let's just be honest. Yep. That's why they go to college.
But then they don't go study kinesiology or any of those things.
They want to play football. Why can't that be a track? Why do we look at in high school, why do we look at football coaches as that's a hobby, but an art teacher, which I didn't send one kid for an art scholarship in the years that I was an art teacher. Why do I get paid a full salary and benefits to do that, but we have kids going on scholarships every year in football? Why can't I get paid to do that? Why can't that be part of my profession?
No, that's fine, but this is what.
Wait, can I just real quick? I want to jump on that. This is a pet peeve. You just hit a red button with me. I had a coach call me one time, first day of school. He had just led his team to like back-to-back Final 8, Elite 8 appearances, and they make this big deal out of the math teacher or the music teacher. I can't remember which one it was, because they had gotten 2 students a total of like $2,500 to $5,000 in scholarships. And he called me, he said, I last year got $1.8 million worth of scholarship for my players, and nobody says boo about it. I get that and there's a reality, which is there is an academic side to it, right? That you have to qualify to get in. But the fact, I mean, it's so amazing what high school, I'm sorry, it's just my own pet. I love what high school coaches do. I don't think you guys get enough credit. Because we want to celebrate everything sometimes but athletics, and especially in my job, that's backwards to me. And then I get people, no offense, that write in and they're like, how come you don't write more about what they scored in math? And I'm like, because this isn't the math section of the paper. I don't know.
We're
I don't know what you want me to say.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think they brought up great points, and it's similar to like the life after football that you're getting at is the systemic issue in high school sports, especially in Florida. There's coaches, like there was a coach that, I remember once I went to a camp as a young kid at Park Vista High School, you may remember him, Coach Dobbs or something at Park Vista, Brian Dobbs. They said that his stipend when he had started 25 years prior was like $4,000 on top of his teaching salary. And when he retired 30 years later, it was like $5,500. So then we have all this homegrown talent that wants to go away and play and helps these other schools, universities, grow their brand, their school's brand, and then they come back home to Florida and can't pour back into our youth with everything that they learned. They have a doctorate in football, right? Talk about degrees. You have a doctorate in football, and you can't even go to your own public school and give back to your community because you're only getting, there's probably not a spot at the school for you to teach. They're probably just throwing you in a role that might not be the role that you want, whatever's available at the school, or you're just living off the stipend as an assistant coach. So then all of our players come home to Florida, and they've just gone out and got educated, come back, and they can't do anything to help the generation that's here. So I agree with both your guys' points.
I want to go to Brian because he mentioned the Final Four, and it was such a fascinating year that year at FAU, coming out of nowhere to be in the Final Four in college basketball. And what was even maybe as big as an upset was the entire team returned. And in this day and age, that is the exact time where a kid, and they have now reached the top, and their value is huge, and schools start trying to poach them. But not only did every one of those top 8 who returned, who had, I think one graduated out of the 9-man rotation, not only did they all return, but every single one of them has gotten their degree from FAU. how important was that to you guys and Dusty May? Because Dusty May also had the coach had a whole bunch of offers, and he came back for one more year. How important was it? How did that happen, and how big was that for you to show that there is a way you can work with this model?
It was an incredible story. It was an incredible run, so much fun at the time. But returning, for Dusty May to return, and then all the players to return with him is just a testament to the culture in that program, and what can inspire student athletes to want to stay and maybe turn down bigger offers to be together and to try to run it back. And it was a really fun year. And you mentioned every one of them. It was important to us. We talk about college sports and the academic piece and the athletic piece. I just think the beauty of college sports is that it is tethered to academics, and I know that may sound old school, but I do think that's important, and it's important for our future. And so the beauty of it is they did all graduate, and the one player that didn't return was Michael Forrest, who had graduated and finished his eligibility. So he and many of them come back and are in our gym and are in our workout facility, some this week. So it's great that they'll always be part of our family, and they'll always have done something really special at FAU. But I think the fact that they, to me, I think that's a really special thing about sport. They really loved each other. They really wanted to play together another year. And yes, we had some donors step up and really provide some incredible generosity to not make it an impossible thing for them to do. But also, as was mentioned earlier, they weren't about highest dollar, how can I make the most money? They were about, we want to stay together, how can we figure out how to make it work? And credit to Dusty May and that whole team. It was really a special culture and a special couple-year run.
Eric, you're now coaching quarterbacks ages, 5 to 30? I mean, a wide range. For those in that sweet spot from, starting high school through high school, does NIL and is this conversations come up with some of the kids you are coaching now? And if it did, what would you tell them? And
Yeah, it does. I mean, only for the top recruits, though.
Right.
Obviously, little kids are just trying to figure out how to take a 3-step drop and get the ball from point A to point B. But, high school kids, as they become varsity starters and they start seeing other high school varsity kids get these offers and these deals, so they're starting to develop their goals and what they want to do, and very few of them get to that point. Where they're like the kid at Michigan or the Jaden Rashada deal. Very few of them get to that point, but I mean, let's be honest, they all want it. Mm-hmm. They're all trying to get there, and I think they should want it, but I'd be worried about them if they didn't, but it comes up quite a bit, but not as much as you think.
Okay.
It's most of the conversations are about football and playing football and getting better as a football player. Okay.
Kevin, 5 years ago, agents only had to look at 20 and 21-year-olds and kind of, gauge I want to represent this kid. You're now 15-year-old, 14-year-olds you're looking at to just kind of say, can this kid develop, and would he be good for me to give advice and represent as a junior or a senior in high school as they're moving on? It seems like it's an awful difficult thing to judge. You have no idea how these kids are going to form and how they're going to mature. So how do you go about that?
There's two different ways to look at it from a representative standpoint. Like, I call it transactional approach, where a representative will start to recruit somebody as a junior in high school. So obviously they know the person's going to get paid that next year. A lot of times, we really like to take the approach of, we're fine to take a freshman in high school and help mentor them and guide them, from a player first, coach first, agent perspective. I've been a player, I've been a coach, and now as a representative, it's like I by no means want to avoid pouring into the kid. A lot of it's more resource based, and the agent doesn't want to, if I get them as a freshman, well, they're going to need stuff the sophomore year. They're going to want this, they're going to want that, and they look at it as a expense. Mm-hmm. Whereas pouring my time into mentoring a young man and helping that family, and typically you see, there might be a family where the oldest child is about to embark on that. When that happens, the family has no experience on what high school to go to, not much less recruiting. Then throw NIL into the mix, like they have no grasp of the monster that it can become. So I think that's really important for me. It's for one, 15 is probably the first time you'd ever start talking to a kid because you can't talk to anybody that's not in high school.
Okay.
So that'd be just from a legal standpoint. But no, from my standpoint, I definitely don't mind taking a kid and knowing that, hey, there's not going to be a price tag until 4 years from now because that kid needs so much maturation. Now, it does provide time for the kid to fall off track or your investment not, be fruitful. So that's why I think the mentorship piece is even more important because of all the distractions that come with the money. You go get 30 offers and there's a kid at West Broward right now who got like 40 offers as a true freshman. He's actually getting true NIL marketing dollars. What does that do to the character of the kid? Who are the right people in his life to help keep him on that track?
And that leads to John. We talked earlier. Some of the stories we hear the stories that, and it's probably just the tip of the iceberg. I'm sure there's so many things that don't get out there. But what we hear about now are the college, the kids transferring, the big names in college. What are some of the stories you can tell without telling? With some of what's going on in high school.
These stories might come out slowly because I have to make sure that nothing is incriminating to me or anybody else. I heard one about a guy who was, let's just say he had some red flags, but he was a very, very talented player. And basically the conversation between the agent and the school was pay him an amount of number that nobody else will match. And it was not a premium position, and they paid a very large number, over $1 million, over a couple years, and that's where the kid wound up, and it wasn't all the things you're saying had nothing to do with any of those things, and it's nothing about the agent. It was just that's what it was going to take to sign that kid. I heard other stories about schools coming in very late in November and all of a sudden the landscape shifted, maybe a coach left or, they had this position locked up and then that kid flips and goes to Alabama instead of school X or whatever. And so here comes 4 other schools saying, we're going to give you X amount of dollars. And it becomes a bidding war. I heard one recently. There was a bidding war in one night. Multiple schools, and it was just, they went back and forth. And at the end of the night, the kid said, it's going to be this one. And the package was obscene. Legitimately obscene. I mean, like more money than I'll ever make in my life.
So how are kids making dollars in high school?
There are very, when you say a kid has 40 offers as a freshman, I'll give you a great example. Jeremiah Smith, who's now at Ohio State.
Yep.
If they had NIL in high school, that is a kid that everybody in the nation would have said, we want to be on the Jeremiah Smith team. There are very few kids, I've never seen a football player like Jeremiah Smith. Okay. There are very few kids that are making a ton of money. Are there kids that have a handful of small deals? Yeah, there's some of those kids.
Well, like Brian said, a kid could be teaching young kids and making $25 for an hour from a family.
Right.
But which is, or promoting something on social media.
There are
I think
a handful of NIL deals
that happens in high school.
I don't think the state's done a very good job of kind of shaping that, but that's another argument for another day. But yes, there are kids in high school that are making some money off their name, image, and likeness.
I think the difference would be, though, are they making dollars from the school they're committed to, or are they making marketing dollars?
Yeah, it's legitimate marketing deals.
Right. They're not being paid by the school to go to the school, but they're making marketing. Yes.
And so really it's like, from a marketing perspective, what kind of return on investment is a brand going to get from a high school kid's ad? And then it really is stemmed to social media. If you've only got 1,000 followers, well, you can kind of measure that as 1,000 views.
And no, go on.
No, you're sure. No. So really, you're not really touching any dollars. More products and services, which is great, and anything that's going to help a kid recover. Or maybe it's IVs for the game. I think that's the beautiful part of it. But until you hit that 10,000 to 15,000 follower count, I don't think any brand's truly getting an ROI. But then it goes, okay, well, what college did the owner of that brand go to? Well, okay, well,
Yes,
so
yeah.
Is it marketing? Is it because he's committed to that school and, hey, I'm the alumni of that school and I actually have a real business that needs marketing? So it's kind of like a catch-22 there, but I think it's fair on both ends.
Yep.
Yeah.
There is a huge component, especially at the high school level, that is lacking, which is education. There is one state, I cannot remember, I want to say Missouri, but I might be wrong on that, that actually said when you are an athletic director or a principal of a high school, as soon as we pass NIL legislation, every single athletic director and principal has to take this course from this company that's going to come in for however long, and we're gonna go through all the ins and outs, because there is stuff about taxes that kids have no idea about. I believe in the next 2 years you are going to hear about a whole pile of kids that are in tax trouble because they got money when NIL first started. They had no idea how to handle it. They went out and bought an $80K car with their $80,000 and they didn't put anything away for taxes or pay anything. I just think the education component is so huge starting at the high school level, and it's very much lacking, I think.
I agree.
Before we go more questions, I just want to get one thing with Brian, because we spoke about this, the trickle-down effect of the NIL/transfer portal. And we just went over. So last year, the FAU's quarterback, Cam Fancher, transferred to UCF. He just won the starting job at UCF. So Coach Kitley came in the transfer portal was Caden Veldkamp, who Coach Kittle had recruited at Western Kentucky and was very interested in transferring. So he leaves Western Kentucky, comes to FAU, because that job was opened by a kid who went to UCF. Western Kentucky went to get the quarterback at Abilene Christian College, who is now their starting quarterback. So this is what happens with the trickle-down effect. And for the others here who are involved in high schools, I think what it's done, it has taken away some of the opportunities for high school kids in recruiting, because now the 2-star or lower 3-star that would have had an opportunity to go to a high-end school with the last 3 or 4 scholarships. They weren't going to give them, the 5-star is always going to get noticed. But that kid, now that's not there, because this transfer portal they're going to the transfer portal to get these kids. When UCF needed a quarterback, they didn't go looking for a starter in high school. They went to FAU to get their starter. So how is, and that's the example I gave for FAU and Brian, but the others who are involved in high schools is more so, how is this impacting high school recruiting? And you saw it from the start, first of all, Eric.
Yeah, I think over the last decade, I saw a dramatic decrease in high school scholarships going to college. So it does affect the high school kids, but I look at all the players as players and kids, whether they're college or high school. And what I did see on the opposite side of that is more college kids are getting opportunities, instead of having to sit somewhere and maybe not get an opportunity to play and move on. I was a transfer in college, and I wasn't allowed to transfer unless I went down to 1AA. We didn't have the grad transfer rule. There was a clause when I signed my scholarship that if I did want to transfer, I had to sit out, and I couldn't go to another SEC school.
Yep.
So there were all kind of restrictions. So would my life have been different if I was allowed to transfer 2 or 3 years earlier to another SEC school? I think so. I was at Florida with Danny Werfel. He ended up winning the Heisman Trophy. It was really hard for me to get on the field. The guy never played bad, right? But I probably could have been playing at 99% of the other schools in the country. And I had to sit there and wait, and then I had to go down a level, which didn't help. It would have been better if I would have played for another SEC school.
Right.
When I came out of college, there wasn't enough data on me as a starting quarterback at a high level to get the opportunity to be a high draft pick. So I think the transfer rules that maybe look like they hurt high school kids, I think it helps college kids. And in a weird way, I think it helps high school kids too, because a lot of these kids are now having to start at smaller schools. Now they're getting a real opportunity to play early. and develop as a player, and then maybe move up to a school. I think
Yep.
it's a transition. A lot of these kids that would get scholarships before, they were never going to play at the school that they went to. They were simply coming in because they needed depth at a position. Well, now that school can go get another guy that from a college that, you know, has proven himself at the college level, and a high school kid has to prove himself and work his way up.
Yep.
Unless he proves that he's ready to play now.
Right.
So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. The only thing that I wish is that the smaller schools all had scholarships.
Yeah.
That's the one bad part, is that the kid that needed a scholarship, I think it's better sometimes to go to a small school, but he's not getting the money to go to school. So that's the kind of catch-22 that I see.
John, are the numbers huge? Are the numbers like of the
I
kids?
don't know the specific data. What I will say is there's a couple things that really shifted with the transfer portal. One of them, by the way, was COVID. And correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that when they started saying you no longer have to sit out a year? Wasn't it around that time?
Around that time.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you had the shift of I don't have to sit out, and I think that was right around the time Michigan State brought in a whole bunch of guys, and I think they were a playoff team that year, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
So that was a big part of it. I think that was the first year that you saw there was one school, I want to say a Texas school, G5, that they didn't sign any high school players.
Yeah.
Every kid they brought in was from the portal. So what we've seen over the last 5 years, specifically in Florida, and Coach, tell me if you disagree with this, the 5-star kids, like you mentioned, the 4-star kids, they're fine.
Yep.
Those high-level 3-stars, if they don't get, there's literally now, depending on the coach that sees them, they could be a low-level power 4, or they could be a 1AA.
Yeah.
It's such a huge gap, and it really just depends on is the right coordinator or the right position coach falling in love with the kid at the right time. But there are kids that three years ago you would have said group of 5.
Yeah.
And now you look at that kid and you go group of 5, maybe 1AA, because there's less scholarships at the group of 5 level, and I get it. Yeah. You've got to win football games. The coaching, we were just talking about a couple minutes ago, the coaching profession in college has never been more volatile. If you don't start winning right away, you are already on your way out. So what are you going to do? You're going to go with a 17-year-old high school kid that you're going to have to take 2 years getting physically ready? Or do you want to go into the portal and get a kid who's been at Alabama and just didn't get enough playing time, and you think that you can turn him into what Alabama thought he was going to be right away? Yeah. That's a pretty easy decision. I'm not smart, and that's an easy decision. Yeah.
And you're getting paid to turn the program around.
Right.
So it's like, hey, am I going to put my job and my family's, survival on a 17-year-old or a 21-year-old who has been groomed and developed?
And this isn't going to happen any longer because the 4-year, the time has expired for the free COVID year. But you have a football player who's, I think, in his 6th year, I think, at FAU. And there are occasions where you could get a 6-year kid, but that's pretty rare. He's had opportunities, but like you said, you have tried to stress continuity over jumping to another school to make a couple extra $1,000, and that's an example at FAU of how staying one place, and he's a starter. Name again?
Alex Atkavich.
Alex Atkavich. Yes. Yeah. Talk about Alex and how you've seen him through 3 coaches. I think he's played for, and he still stayed.
Yes.
And it's that importance. How do you convince a kid that we want you to stay here, and what can you say to them to keep them there, as opposed to jumping and making an extra $10,000?
All credit to Coach Kitley in that conversation, and credit to Alex. I think they hit it off right away, and we've had like most schools at our level, we've had a bunch of guys. Pretty much anyone that has been really good for us they've had opportunities and they've had people in their ears. But I think that the maturity that Alex has, seems to be obvious to me and a lot of the people around our building, goes a long way. And him recognizing that he's in a good place, and I think we have a really good coaching staff in place, and I think he's excited about the current direction of the program. But I think in any instance, and we look at it not just football but across the board in all of our sports, if we can build a really good student athlete experience and a really good culture, if our kids like going to class and given our location, if they like wearing shorts and flip-flops in January, that sure benefits us. But we try to just create a good experience all around, and you win some, you lose some, but I think by and large, even before NIL and before our current state, we always did pretty good in the transfer portal with kids wanting to stay here, and so that's been an advantage for us. But every place is different, but I think it has to be more than just dollars and cents, because everybody has that, and we all have to generate as much revenue as we can for revenue share in the current state and in prior world NIL, and that's just part of athletic directors' jobs in this world. But on top of that, the difference maker can be having the right coaches in place and having as good of a culture as you can. And some of the career development pieces that were mentioned earlier, I think, are critically important. We think it's really important to talk to mom and dad on a visit about the career opportunities in Boca Raton and in South Florida. It's a better opportunity to go find a job after college than most college towns. So when we talk about it, we have to come through on that promise. And we have a lot of our sponsors and donors and community members that take pride in hiring our former athletes. It's a highly competitive group and very intelligent, very, it's by all accounts, it's a disciplined and time management. There's a lot of data to study and studies that suggest that hiring Division I athletes is a really good thing. So we're constantly in the community selling that as well. And so the hope is that someone's been here 4 or 5, hopefully not 6 years always, but however many years it takes, that they have great opportunities after FAU, and that continues the trajectory.
Our Florida athletes, we have the speed, we have incredible athleticism. We leave and go to schools, and the universities and the football programs end up getting low football IQ players.
Right.
And that stems from what I was talking about earlier with our best players not being able to come home and coach our kids. So I think paying the high school coaches more, especially in the public schools, can make those kids have even more of an impact than, to your point, junior college. But I do think that's another great approach. Junior college would help. I'd argue that maybe we help the high school coaches better educate the players on their way up as well.
I don't see a lot of sports getting cut. I think the idea of cutting sports and reducing scholarships or reducing scholarships, I'm opposed to it. We're holding students harmless in any way at FAU. Like we're trying to do whatever we can to continue to grow our sport programs across the board. I have heard about some that have 30 plus sport programs that are really looking at reprioritizing some scholarship dollars and things like that. But I have not seen a mass wave of cutting sports, and I think that when we did around the COVID time, a lot of those schools that cut a bunch of sports ended up adding them right back. I just think when you look at the impact that those students, they're not all scholarship, but the walk-on students in those sports have on the campus as a whole, I never am a proponent of cutting sports. In terms of the revenue, where does the revenue come from? Every formula is different, every model is different at every school, but I do think the places that are at the cap and at that full $22 million number, that's coming from general revenues as well as donated funds, and it's being distributed in a formula similar to the House settlement numbers that have come out.
So for people, there was a House settlement where each school was allowed $21.5 million, $22 million to pay their athletes in NIL money. Brian said that schools on FAU's level will not get to that figure, probably. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, not all schools will get to that figure. I think schools in the group of 6 level, I think we'll be really competitive within our league, but we won't necessarily be at the cap, and no one in our league will be. But schools in the SEC and the Big Ten, where they're at the cap, and many have reported to be at much higher numbers. But those schools will have revenue from the general funds, revenue from conference distribution, ticket sales, sponsorship sales, and then they'll distribute it within their strategic plan.
If I could add a point, I think the other sports oftentimes in certain markets do get funding. Like for one instance, Texas Tech, which is not a great example because of how much money their whole athletic department has gotten, but they have a girls softball player who's making $1 million, and she, I believe, came through the transfer portal, and they won the national championship. So we're talking about money coming in to a sport that doesn't have a professional sport. So at the end of the day, like, all football and basketball have been paying for all the other sports the whole time.
Correct.
And now we're getting in the fair market value or a player's value. Well, where does the money come from? From the revenue. Those sports don't make money for the school as much. So I think it's finding that fine line between, well, hey, if you want money, like you have to make money. So if there's not fans in attendance, there's not a TV deal, if there's not an appetite by viewers to actually consume the games at home, well, then you're not going to have TV revenue, you're not going to have advertising dollars, and it's a trickle down. So to me, I definitely understand. I don't want certain athletes to like not have an option to play in college, and I think that all Olympic sports are very important. But at the end of the day, who's going to pay? I mean, it's like who's going to pay the bill? Who's got the money? Where's the revenue coming from? It's got to come from the people who are making money, in the sports that are making money.
So each one of you, we'll just wrap it up. And some of you had touched on this earlier, but where are college athletics headed? Start with Brian.
Thank you. I think I've been no stranger to point out the fact that I think we're all heading towards collective bargaining, and I think we've kicked the can down the road for a long time, and I think it's exciting that we're where we are, in that we're going to be to a better place soon. I mentioned a period of rapid change. That's where we've been in, but I think the future is not too far out, and that's us coming to the table, collectively bargaining and figuring out exactly what the new model needs to look like. We need to get a plan, and that needs to happen sooner rather than later. That being said, that was actually a perfect lead-in, because when we look at where the money's coming from, I think we really need to focus on collective bargaining at first in the most profitable sports. And I think there's two really good models in the NBA and the NFL that have players associations that operate with profit sharing, that have really good models that I think we can mimic. But with that, I don't think that we should ignore the fact that we are serving as their minor leagues. So I think it's also important that we need to know that we are doing really, really good things for the NFL and the NBA, and de facto serving as minor league programs in both sport leagues. And when you look at it, college sports, I say that from a player development standpoint, but not from a popularity standpoint. If you look at college football popularity across America, we're two behind the NFL. If you look at college basketball and college football, arguably we're the most popular entity in all of sports in the world. So most people don't realize that. So I think that piece is really important. And then the next piece I'd say, and this has been written about nationally recently, but many in our world have talked about it a long time, but we have not done a good enough job of telling our story of what we do for Olympic sports. Because you're right, a lot of those sports, they don't make money on their own. But we're also the only country in the world, I believe, that doesn't federally fund Olympic sports. Our Olympic sports do a great job for America to represent us in the Olympics. And there's no reason, in my opinion, those student athletes that have great GPAs and are graduating and doing good things, contributing to society, but also on top of that, going and representing our country in a great Olympics program, there's no reason we can't support them with federal funding. So I think if you have federal funding for the sports that don't generate revenue on their own, that's step one. That's probably step two. Step one is probably focusing on the highly profitable sports. And in those sports, we need a plan, and part of that is coming to a table, collectively bargaining a plan together that's rules we all agreed upon that could have multi-year contracts, player protections, school protections. I think if we get those two things, I think we're in a really good shape, and I think it's going to happen. And I know we talk to people every day, donors and fans and everybody, and people in this room that can be frustrated with the state of college athletics. I'm with you. I share everybody's frustration, but I also share the passion for college sports, and I think the future is very bright.
Well said.
Eric, you could also ask you where the future of high school athletics is going. That's been more of your area.
So I think I'm excited where college football is going. I think the popularity of the sport, whether it's NFL or college, I think as a former player and coach, I'm so excited to be able to watch the NFL grow and move overseas. It's helping the leagues overseas. Like we're watching European games here now, live stream of, American players going over there and playing and getting opportunities. I'm excited for all the high school players to have these big opportunities moving on to college. And and not have to have that kind of 3, 4, 5 year gap before they can earn a living. I think that's exciting. I really looking forward to the time where this is not like an evolving, changing process. And I think a lot of people don't like the transfer portal and NIL because it's new, it's different, it's disrupting, what we've known forever. It's been the same forever. And so I think once a couple years go by and this becomes the new norm, I don't think people are going to make a big deal about a player changing teams. I mean, in the NFL, they do it every year, and people will get together and have parties and talk about their fantasy football and who they're going to trade and what team the guy's going to be playing for next year. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it is change, though. I think people have to get used to it. I think there has to get some control around it where, both parties, the players and the schools have some more responsibility to each other, and you can't just, part ways whenever they want. But I'm all for the players. As you can tell the way I spoke tonight, I'm a players coach. I think players, they put their bodies on the line all the time. They're in harm's way all the time. I use Jordan Travis as an example. And I'll tell you just one quick thing about him, just because I brought him up. That kid was more loyal to a school than any kid I ever met. His brother played at Florida State baseball, and all he ever wanted to do since he was a little kid was play for Florida State. And when he got to his junior year, and he became a household name in this country, there were a lot of other schools that wanted his services for a lot more money.
Yeah.
And he stayed at Florida State. And he probably could have made 4 or 5 times what he made. And it was all about the loyalty. And he wanted to be a Florida State Seminole. And I love that about him. But you saw what happened at the end of his senior year. He never got to play again. So that $4 million, $3 million, whatever extra that it would have been, that might have changed the course of the rest of his life. And he might have been able to do things he maybe could never do again with that income. So I think sometimes, when you're talking about, chasing the money or whatever, it's the same as a lot of people do in their jobs. They're looking for a promotion.
Right.
They're trying to earn a better living, right? So just because he's your favorite quarterback, that doesn't mean he's not allowed to chase his dreams too. So I think everybody's just got to look at it the same as everybody else's job in America. Everybody's trying to move up. Yeah. Everybody's trying to do better and take care of their families and have a better life. So I think we got to get out of this mindset that the schools own the kids. You know what I mean? That's not the way it is. Yeah. I think it's a two-way street. College coaches come there, they want to do a job, but they also are trying to get better, and they're trying to move up and become, the next Nick Saban or Steve Spurrier or whoever, and I'm okay with that. I think it's fine that coaches can take other opportunities, but I think the players should be able to as well. And I think I'm excited about everything. I just hope that we can kind of make it more consistent.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Knows what they're getting into.
And that's agree 100%. People see an athlete sign these multi-million dollar, and they're all upset. And you ask anybody out there, when's the last time you turned down $1 million raise? When's the last time you turned down $100 million?
When's the last time they got upset about a kid singer or actor making millions of dollars?
Yeah,
they don't. It's the football players.
Yeah.
Everybody's upset when they're making money. I don't understand why.
I know. I agree.
I think it's probably, they think they're it's easy for them and they're getting something for nothing, but I don't think that's true. I think I know these football players, they pour their heart and soul
their whole
into
lives.
this.
Right.
Their whole lives they work towards this. Harder than most people ever can imagine. So it's I think it's fair.
Yeah.
I really do.
Kevin, what do you think from your point of view where this is headed?
I'm going to touch on one point here, and then I'll give you kind of my scope on it. But I think thing that people don't realize is that life expectancy for NFL players or athletes, like I don't want to mistake it, but I believe it's in the high 50s, definitely under 65. So like, it's a high collision sport. So when I hear people say like, oh, why is he getting paid that? He should just get his scholarship. It's like, you've worked your whole life for something that's physically damaging your body, and you still might not profit from it in a professional level. And then ultimately, you're walking with aches and pains for the rest of your life. So there's no protection for health insurance long term. There's nothing set up. So I'm definitely very pro player.
Yep.
And I think it is very weird how the fans can be so negative to players wanting to advance their careers when you don't get any of that stigma from coaches. So I just agree with Coach there on that. But my scope of where this is going, to answer your question, I think we should very much mirror the Premier League in soccer in Europe. I think that right now, to get to a collective bargaining agreement, we'd need all of the conferences to agree and work together. And they are not friendly to each other. The SEC, as FSU many times been trying to move from the ACC. A lot of other conferences don't want that. And so there's a hierarchy there. So I think there's going to be a longer path to getting it. I think one point that I'd really like to make is that how tech has changed this. Name, image, and likeness is inherently social media based. Obviously that didn't exist really a decade ago. So I think if we were back, whenever the NFL started and they had social media and brand likeness, I don't think we would have had a CBA then anyways, right? So I think now that the players can do so much for business development in their own right? Some athlete, Jeremiah Smith, he's got a Battle endorsement, Adidas endorsement, a Caitlin Clark, a basketball player who's in her professional league is paying $80,000 and she's got $1 million Nike deal.
Yeah.
Why shouldn't she be able to do that?
Right.
But I think the parameters that allow that is very social media based and it's very tech based, which the prehistory of all athletics didn't have that as a component. Now we do have it. How does that affect it? Well, it's incredibly volatile, and like we said, you can't allow somebody to not make more money. So now that just because there's a new way to make money doesn't mean you have to handcuff the players. So it's very, very, there's a lot of moving parts, and I don't think we're as close as we could be. I loved your explanation. I think there's a lot of simple points that could really be cohesive. I just think the tech aspect to me, the TV deals, my hard take is we're going to have a Power 4 conference. The bottom 30% of teams that lose go to group of 6. The top group of 6 winners bump back up, similar to European soccer. Yeah. And Apple or Amazon's going to own the entire thing. It's going to be some giant tech company, and it's going to be a streaming service, and here we go.
John, what are high school sports going to look like in
It's not going to look like
5
the
years?
Premier League, I can tell you that. I think we're still figuring out what NIL looks like at the high school level, and the reality is that for 99.99% of the kids, it'll never be an issue in high school. For a small few. Now the question is really what happens to those kids that are getting ready right now to sign in December, and what kind of numbers are they getting tossed at them, and what's real and what's not, and how much education do they have. I'm still a big proponent of we need more education at the high school level so they have a better understanding of what they're walking into. You look at a school like IMG Academy, we did a story a couple months ago, that they do so much trying to, now again, most of their kids are gonna go play Power 5, Power 4, but they spend a lot of time educating their students so that you walk in, hopefully, with a better understanding of what you're getting into and what you're signing and what you need to look out for, and do you need an agent and all those other things. I think a lot of these kids do. I'm very pro what you guys are doing. So I think education's a big part, and I'm very much in favor that I think in the next few years we're gonna get to the point where we have to have something that is collectively bargained. I feel like, and it's only been 4 years, right? We started out as a Wild Wild West, now we have revenue sharing. Yeah. I mean, in reality, that's fairly quick in America, right? That we've gone from no rules to let's all put money in a pool and see if we can pay everybody. And Texas Tech and other schools say, that's nice, we're going to spend a lot more. But I think we'll probably get to the point where we're going to have a little more commonality, where it's not just whoever has the deepest pockets wins. I don't know if that'll ever not happen, but I think you want to get closer to where it's a level playing field.
Well, I got to say, this was highly educational, and I think this was an awesome, awesome job. And I wanted to the four of them, we thank so much for being here. None of them has an NIL deal with the Palm Beach Post. So they've done this all, they have donated their time for us, and we appreciate that so much, and thank you very much for the night. It was awesome.
Thank you for having us. Thank you all.